Hey guys, I'm so happy to be able to put out a video before conference. I'm so excited that conference is finally here. I'm sure you are too. And there's so much to talk about since the last video message that came out on March 10th. Since that day, so many things have happened, from banks failing to more natural disasters, being able to see the northern lights down into the southwest part of the United States. All of these incredible phenomena happening in the sky, happening all over the world, and the crazy amounts of snow, rain, and flooding that seems to be happening all over the world. So let's talk about it. Now, before we get into it, I just want to share an update. I'm currently working on a new room in my house where I can do these videos. I'm so excited. I'm putting together a creative space where I can record and edit these videos and work on all the other creative projects that I do on the side and have my own space to do it, free of interruptions. So I've been working on that behind the scenes, and I'm really excited to be able to have this new office/studio. So stay tuned for that. It's going to be awesome. Okay, let's get into today's video message. So we're going to go ahead and just follow the timeline of my notes since the last video message. So right after I put out that last video about paying the piper, I received an email about the March edition of the Liahona magazine that the church puts out. And it caught my attention because it was featuring an article that was all about parents navigating the storms in life and being able to find peace during those storms. So I actually left something out of my last video message, and I realized it after it was too late and I had already published it. But everything happens for a reason, and I think that message sets the tone for today's video message. So around the time of my last video message, I had planned to talk about this in my video, how that week I had noticed a lot of parents who were really struggling, especially in my community, in my neighborhood, in my ward. Lots of parents of teenagers who were just sort of feeling at their wits' end, feeling like their teenagers were pushing all the right buttons, or I should say all the wrong buttons. Regardless, pushing all of their buttons until they just couldn't take it anymore. And these parents were exploding, losing their temper, losing their patience, saying things that they regretted saying later, and behaving in ways that they regretted behaving later. But pointing out how their children had just become so difficult, that they were so angry and so upset, and were just relentless about it, that it was enough to cause these good parents who are amazing people to lose their cool. So in my own life as a parent, we have dealt with our ups and downs over the last couple of weeks, as have most parents from what I hear. After I put out that last video message, I experienced that as well. And what that did for me was it really had me step back and take a serious look at the bigger picture. I could see what it is that the adversary is doing right now. And I wasn't too happy with myself in that moment that I had let him get the best of me. And I thought, I am not going to let that happen again. No matter how hard he pushes, I am going to cling to my Savior and keep my peace. But I just keep feeling like we are in that final moment where we cross the finish line. And it's just that final stretch where if we just endure, if we just push through it, if we just keep holding on, we are going to make it and we are going to be just fine. I truly believe that. And I hope today's video message helps convey that. So that sort of began the theme for this message, which really isn't out of the ordinary if you are a parent of teenagers, especially teenage girls. So, however, what's different about this time, these last 2 weeks, is I've been able to feel peace during those storms. In fact, as I've done my best to look to the Lord during those storms, which is exactly what we're studying right now in Come Follow Me, I love how that always happens. But as I look to the Lord during those storms, I've noticed a couple of things. First of all, I've noticed a great deal of peace that I have been able to feel during that storm. Second of all, I've noticed that when I do this, the storms don't last as long. Third of all, I've noticed that if I can stick it out without giving up, without losing hope, without becoming frustrated and losing my peace, there has been some kind of a blessing or reward that follows every time. And it's just been amazing. So life hasn't become easier. I'm not experiencing less storms. It's just become a different mindset for me. When the storms come, instead of seeing them as these overwhelming, monstrous, impossible obstacles in front of me that are absolutely terrifying, I'm now starting to see them as just bumps in the road. I have to keep going down that road. Sometimes I can drive around the bump. Sometimes I have to drive over it. But either way, I stay on that road and I keep heading forward. And maybe a lot of you out there are feeling the same way in your life. Have you been noticing that too? Share below down in the comments. I would love to hear about it. And of course, it's 1:44 p.m. as I'm sharing this very message right now. So you know that saying, which came first, the chicken or the egg? I kind of ask myself that question often when it comes to struggles, challenges, trials, and blessings. And I'm not sure which it is, and maybe it doesn't matter. But I've noticed that right after a crazy trial or challenge, there is always an incredible blessing. So it could be that the adversary is aware of that blessing around the corner. He sees it, and he doesn't want you to reach it. He wants to distract you. So he's going to do everything he can to cause you to lose focus or to stall and delay you from receiving that blessing. Or it could be that when we do our best to endure the trials in our lives, because of the divine laws of God, we receive blessings. President Nelson talks all about those divine laws of cause and effect. Every time you do A, B, and C, the results are always X, Y, and Z. And I have found that to be true with trials and blessings. So with that in mind, I've been able to remember that, or at least I try to, when I'm going through one of those speed bumps. I tell myself, it's just a bump in the road. It's not going to be the first. It's not going to be the last. I can go around it or I can go over it. But either way, there's some smooth driving ahead, at least until I get to the next bump. And if I can just focus on that, I know that I will be blessed. So let's talk about that. Now we're going to talk more about that in a minute, but I want to continue on this timeline. So this message of navigating life's storms and being able to feel peace is what started out this week's video message. Later that day, March 10th, after my last video message came out, that was the day that the Silicon Valley Bank failed. Again, another bump in the road for a lot of people. This bump in the road created a lot of fear, a lot of theories of what might happen next, a lot of chaos and a lot of uncertainty followed that throughout the weekend. And even though that particular situation sort of worked itself out, it didn't leave a lot of people feeling very confident right now. It sort of created a sense of instability and, of course, more uncertainty. And of course, there were articles published at the beginning of the year in all the major newspapers, on a lot of major news websites that covered those prophecies of Nostradamus. This happens every year, towards the end of the year, into the beginning of the following year. Every news outlet loves to cover those prophecies because it stirs up a lot of curiosity, it creates a lot of interest, and it generates a lot of clicks. Those articles typically do very well. So at the beginning of 2023, a lot of major media outlets reported on the 2023 predictions or prophecies of the French astrologer Nostradamus from 450 years ago. What those stories reported on were a Great War of 2023. And here's a headline from a month ago that says World War III is already here. A change in kingship for the British Isles. We have a coronation coming up in May for King Charles. Dry lands getting drier, so increased drought. Currently, it's being reported that Italy and France are bracing for another year of drought. Somehow, these countries are being skipped by all of this rain and snow. And also a forecast of great flooding. Here's a headline, Life-threatening California flooding fueled by Pineapple Express. And California is just one of many places right now that is experiencing extreme flooding. Major riots and social upheavals and lots of civil rebellion. There's a lot of places where this is happening, but this headline stood out to me this last week. Deadly violence and shootings caused deaths in Miami, Florida on spring break in American war zone city, declared state of emergency. Apparently this year, spring break got pretty out of hand, and I saw lots of stories on the news showing footage of complete chaos and rioting. Lots of people breaking out in violence everywhere. And these Nostradamus news stories always make mention of his prophecy about a new pope in 2023. He mentions a replacement pope known as Peter who brings a scandal upon the Roman Catholic Church, and that afterwards the city of Rome is destroyed and the dreadful judge will judge the people. And just yesterday this popped up. Pope Francis in hospital with respiratory infection. He won't be able to attend Palm Sunday services. He also mentioned for 2023 that the sun shall sear the shining sea. The Black Sea's living fish shall boil. This year there was a headline about dolphins and other sea creatures being washed up dead on the shores of the Black Sea in unusually high numbers. Scientists investigating this are pointing the finger at increased Russian naval activity due to the war in Ukraine. And there seems to be a pattern. Red tide brings tons of dead fish to Gulf beaches ahead of spring break. This red algae bloom that's toxic looks like the water has been turned to blood. And it's interesting that this is around the time we also saw the red northern lights in the sky. That color red is very symbolic. And there's more. Mystery as thousands of dead fish found on Hong Kong beach. And then this one. Drone footage shows millions of dead fish blanket river. A sudden heat wave across the western part of New South Wales has left a blanket of dead fish in Australia's second longest river. Dead fish in Florida, beached whales in New Jersey, sea urchins, starfish, and crayfish washing ashore in New Zealand, millions of rotting fish clogging up a river in the Australian outback, a mass fish die-off in Poland. Around the world, freshwater and marine creatures are dying in large numbers, leaving experts to puzzle over the cause. Could it be related to these solar flares? This was just from yesterday. X-class solar flare explodes, sparks blackouts in Asia. Solar storm shadow looms over Earth. So this is why we keep getting these incredible, spectacular northern lights shows. Because of all of these solar flares, we keep having this activity with the sun, and it's transferring to the poles and releasing that energy out through the top. It's definitely having an effect and an impact on the events and weather here on the Earth. This says, as the sun's solar cycle 25 nears, solar activity is getting more intense. Whereas in a normal year, astronomers detect a couple of X-class solar flares. We have already seen 7 of them strike the Earth by the end of March. Previous solar flares have also badly affected Australia, South America, and Africa. In fact, oil grids had to temporarily shut down due to a solar storm attack last month. In the worst case scenario, solar storms in the G4 and G5 category can potentially damage satellites, break down mobile networks and internet services, cause power grid failures, and corrupt sensitive ground-based electronics such as pacemakers and ventilators. And great economic failure or collapse. And of course, we had the bank failure in March. Here's a screenshot where I saw my pay attention number 144. It says bank collapses and inflation hint it's time to prepare. And the final Nostradamus headline that seems to be an appetizer for 2024 says 2024 will be the year of the big earthquake, also the year of the dragon. The news articles that report on this specific event interpret his writings as referring to an earthquake in the United States and an earthquake in northern Italy, potentially bringing destruction to the city of Rome. So 2023 sort of starts off on this negative note. And then, of course, as things progress throughout the year, people seem to point it back to these 2023 predictions, which continues to escalate that fear and uncertainty, which is exactly what the adversary wants. So fast forward a few days to March 14th. I remember that morning I heard 2 jets take off at 6:45 a.m., which I don't remember ever happening as long as I have lived here. I mean, it was still dark outside. I remember when the sound of that woke me up, it was this feeling of, okay, those jets were clearly needed because that's not normal practice time. Later that day, we saw in the news the story of the Russian jet who took down the US drone. What's crazy about that is that night before that happened, I had had a small dream about US pilots and jets and a secret mission. So that was an interesting day. Now, it was also Pi Day, March 14th, 3.14. And we were having an activity that night at the church. We were all making pies and bringing them to share. And I remember thinking, today feels really significant. What is it about pie that I need to know? And then when I heard pie, I heard in my mind, Pied Piper. And I was reminded of the video I had just put out a few days prior about the Pied Piper. So in the last video message, a word that kept coming up was piper. And leading up to this video message, the word that kept coming up was pie. So I looked up the word pied and thought, well, what does that mean? Why was he called the Pied Piper? And pied simply means 2 or more colors. And as the story goes, this piper who came into the village was wearing colorful clothing. In some fairy tales, it was referred to a coat of many colors. Now, to me, as I talked about in that last video message, the Pied Piper symbolizes the adversary, symbolizes in making a deal with the things of the world or the adversary. And as a consequence of that, him leading the children away, leading the children to a spiritual death. These children disappeared. It was never made certain what happened to them, whether they were still alive, whether they died. But to me, that symbolizes a spiritual death, being lost, these lost children. And it reminds me of lost Israel. It reminds me of lost sheep. The adversary is the one who distracts us with his musical tune, and we sort of fall into a trance and follow him into the darkness, where we become lost and we experience that spiritual death. I found it interesting that between March 10th, when the bank collapsed, to March 14th, which was Pi Day, that so much had happened in the news with Russia and the drone, tornadoes and earthquakes, and so much more that we're going to talk about in today's video. So again, I heard it's time to pay the piper, or in other words, it's time to settle your debts. If you haven't accepted the Lord's gift of already paying that price on your behalf, You will pay it on your own. That day comes when the piper has to be paid. And it feels as though that's where we're at right now. So back on the timeline after the last video message. Next up in the news was this. I was seeing it everywhere. A dangerous flood event soon to unfold in California as they brace for significant extreme rain and snow due to an atmospheric river hitting most parts of the state on Friday, which could be life-threatening. Snowfall totals in the highest elevations could reach over 100 inches. The breaking news continued across the country. This screenshot, damaging winds, large hail, and tornadoes possible. This headline reads, "It's crazy." The day after the bank failed, so this was on 3/11, March 11th, there was a warning of earthquakes springing up on the New Madrid fault line. And then this storm, known as the nor'easter. The word Easter stands out to me because Easter's coming up next week. And of course, we've been talking a lot about north lately in all of my videos. So we have this nor'easter, keywords north and Easter. Pay attention. The headlines continued. New storm to bring more snow to the Midwest and rain and storms to the south. Also, headlines all over the world. Freddy kills dozens in East Africa. Crocodile threat swimming cows in Australia. As you can see, everything, everywhere is underwater. Snow in Los Angeles, a rare phenomenon. And at the same time, we have these bizarre headlines. Pentagon officials suggest alien mothership in our solar system could send mini probes to Earth. And then in world news, North Korea's Kim Jong-un calls for nuclear attack preparedness on the US and South Korea. And just as I said that, I looked down and that voice recording was 11.3 seconds. There's that pay attention number 311. And a couple of people sent this to me. It says, Trilateral Commission calls 2023 Year 1 of New World Order. Members discuss China, middle powers, and ChatGPT at the meeting in India. And 1 week ago, my husband texted me and said, you might want to look on the news and see what's happening in France right now. So I was curious, I pulled up the news, and this is what I saw. Paris was on fire. France was burning with lots of protests, with the people protesting against their president. Sounds like the goal is another French Revolution. And my friend sent this to me. It says, planets on parade have always meant something. One of the greatest was when all 5 planets, following each other in a procession, followed by all 12 constellations going down over the horizon and then rising the next day to finish at exactly 9 a.m. And guess what started at 9 a.m.? That was the day that Gordon B. Hinckley dedicated the Palmyra Temple, opening up the year 2000. Many have compared the 12 constellations to the 12 apostles, which seems only fitting. There's also a scripture that goes with this, and how the sign was a fulfillment of prophecy, which I will find. It's Revelation 6:13. And that scripture reads, And the stars of heaven fell unto the earth, even as a fig tree casteth her untimely figs, when she is shaken of a mighty wind. And it says in the footnotes, figs that ripen late, hanging on the tree even into winter. Then this headline, rare chance to see 5 planets at once to take place over 6 sunsets. So again, something very rare and something pointing us up towards the heavens. And then my friend shared this with me. She said, also, look what happened in the heavenlies yesterday on the Jewish calendar's first Nisan. She sent it at 9/11. There's that pay attention number. Urgency, emergency, 911. These screenshots that she shares talks about how the first day of the year usually was used for reckoning the reigns of kings. So the witnesses of 2 calendars from 2 nations agree to the very day. And it goes on to talk about the Sermon on the Mount and how the Savior was able to take 5 loaves of bread and 2 fishes and feed the 5,000. And this person points out that if you look at these 5 planets and their alignment, you've got the 5 loaves, and then you've got these 2 constellations that make the 2 fish. So people were pointing that out and saying, how fitting is that right now? And that this is also a part of our Come Follow Me study. It totally coincides with what's happening in the skies. So as I'm recording this right now, an owl just hit my window. I heard this loud bang and my husband went outside to check it out, and there was an owl laying there. It just flew into the window at night. So I don't know, kind of strange. Anyways, here's another screenshot of something my friend sent me. She said, I'm totally going to be looking this week. The first vision was on a Palm Sunday, as was the Hosanna shout in 2020. It was a literal 200th anniversary of the first vision. So we've talked about this in past videos before. She says, and this upcoming conference falls on Palm Sunday. And wait, there's more. Down below, it says a lot is happening this weekend. General Conference, Palm Sunday, 5-planet alignment, and new auroras from a second hole in the sun. What they are calling a second giant hole, they're saying it has appeared on the sun and could send 1.8 million mile per hour solar winds towards Earth. And then this screenshot on March 24th, there's that pay attention number 123. It's that countdown number on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3, boom, or 3, 2, 1. So it's talking about how the northern lights were visible north of Kansas City. Now what's interesting is the northern lights continued to be spotted all throughout the southwestern United States, as far south as Arizona. And there were pictures taken over Flaming Gorge and Tooele. And these pictures showed red lights in the sky. The red seems very symbolic. And my friend wrote, the red aurora lights as far south as Phoenix. Just yesterday, I was wondering if they came as far south as Adamandiaman because we had a lot of clouds here last night and couldn't see, and I guess they did. Photographer caught them here in our area. The last time I've heard of red aurora lights being spotted so far south in the U.S. was on April 6, 2000 for the dedication of the Palmyra Temple and what I think was the opening of the 7th seal. With this falling on a holy day, I'm really wondering what it was marking. Something seemed to have happened. And below that she wrote, and the 40 years thing, wow, hitting at the same time. So we're going to talk about that a little bit later on in this video. But she said, this caught my attention today, made me think of the time to get on the ark theme. And it says, all aboard, the Life at Sea ship will set sail in November, traveling to 375 destinations in 135 countries across all 7 continents. This was featured on Good Morning America. So it's a 3-year cruise. It leaves in November of this year and returns in 2026. And during this week, on March 22nd, here was that pay attention number 113. This is about the seismic unrest as earthquakes continue to pop up around the world. And we're talking about 7.7 magnitudes. And the day prior to that was March 21st. Again, there's that countdown number 321, 123. Large 6.5 earthquake in Afghanistan. Europe is moving. The new Madrid fault line mound hit. Today, our stake sent out an email to everyone all about flooding preparedness, emergency preparedness, and earthquake preparedness. And then on March 25th, there was this headline, explosion at R.M. Palmer Chocolate Factory in Pennsylvania leaves 3 dead. Company offers condolences. Just like with the train derailments, we're seeing a pattern of these explosions. So this one here, the same day, but it was published on February 22nd, but this article popped up right next to the other one. It says, Ohio metal alloy factory explosion kills one, injures more than a dozen others. So all of these things seem to be continuing to happen in, near, and around Ohio. And then just a couple days ago, several barges loose on Ohio River in Louisville, one carrying methanol, is sinking. Barges get stuck on Kentucky Dam after breaking from tugboat. Speaking of boats, a friend posted this. She said, when I read about the tragic event that happened yesterday in Nashville, Tennessee, where 3 9-year-old students and 3 members of staff were shot and killed at a Christian private school called the Covenant School, I found myself stuck on those 3 words, the Covenant School. And I love how she pointed out that the temple is our ark. The ark is our covenant. That's where there's protection and safety. So to me, when I heard this, and I thought of that attack on that school that she points out is the Covenant School, it was very symbolic that the adversary, the enemy, is on the attack right now against our covenants. And she points out that the temple is the place where we learn about covenants. It's the covenant school. So again, it's very symbolic that the adversary is on the attack against the temple, against that work, and against our covenants. And the reason that's so important to him is because he knows that those covenants are the ark. It's what keeps us protected and safe from his power. So he's going to do everything that he can to attack it. Then, of course, today, while editing this video, this breaking headline popped up everywhere. Trump indicted. This will be the beginning of a very interesting era in our country. When this headline popped up, it's almost as though I could hear everyone saying, and so it begins. So right as someone shared with me that Saudi Arabia and Iran were seeking a peace deal together, and they were also seeking entry into the BRICS alliance, which is an alliance of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. So they're saying if Iran and Saudi Arabia join the BRICS alliance, they have the potential to become a powerful military alliance. So many believe that this is what has started this new world order, is this group of countries right here. Well, as I was having a conversation about this with someone in a chat, I looked at my phone and it was 911, urgency, emergency. And this was on March 24th, the day that the Northern Lights were spotted in Utah. On the same day, this popped up on my phone, the Bucks versus the Jazz. The Bucks won at 144 points to 116. There was that pay attention number 144, the gathering of Israel. Now, bucks stood out to me. Bucks are what we refer to as dollar bills. And Wisconsin had been in the news as the Northern Lights were spotted that day as far north as Wisconsin and clear down into Utah. So here we have Wisconsin versus Utah. With Wisconsin for the win, it's fitting as the lights shine brighter the closer you are to the North Pole. So the lights were much brighter in Wisconsin as compared to Utah. And during that same week, right when I greeted my son with a surprise, I looked down and it's 144. And I always see that number in connection to my kids. It's a number that's definitely tied to their generation and what it is they were sent here to do, gather Israel. The very next day, on St. Patrick's Day, we were listening to Irish music and this song came on. So I looked down and it was 144. There was that pay attention number again. I shared this experience later in the video, but I had been doing family history that week on a family from Ireland. And I thought, how fitting, just in time for St. Patrick's Day. And there was that pay attention number 144, the gathering of Israel. And then this headline caught my attention, and there was that pay attention number 144. Piers Morgan meets man who claims to be reverse aging. And then at a PTA meeting, they passed around this sheet of paper right here with a total of our budget balance, and there was the pay attention number again, 144, going both directions. And we spend this money on this generation, on these youth. Also this month, a friend wished me a happy belated birthday, and there was my pay attention number, texted to me at 11:44 a.m. And she was mentioning the temple dress I got for my birthday. How fitting with that number. As I was responding to an email about cleaning the church on Saturday, I offered to clean the most undesirable rooms in the building, which are the bathrooms. And I noticed that right when I sent that email, I had 113 emails in my inbox. There was that pay attention number 311, trying to be like the people in 3 Nephi chapter 11, cleaning the church and doing what we can to ease the burdens of others. That's how we become a Zion-like people. Well, somebody else ended up snagging the bathrooms, and we ended up cleaning the kitchen. This was a very interesting video that popped up. It had my pay attention number all over it, 113. It says, Understanding Our Differences, a message to our Christian brothers and sisters, from a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I absolutely loved that. Again, it's how we become a people, like the people of 3 Nephi chapter 11. And again, there was that same pay attention number on the same YouTube channel. I highly recommend this video. It was very, very inspiring. I'll have a link to it down below. Now, in 2019, I did a video series called Hold to the Rod. And it was a 3-part series. In fact, again, I'll have links down below if you want to check that out. I have found it interesting that as of lately, a lot of people have been reaching out to me and asking me for those video links. But I don't think that's a coincidence. I think that there are a lot of things happening right now where the adversary is making one last attempt to just go at everyone full force. He's pulling out all the stops. And so as that begins to escalate, people are looking for life jackets and preservers to toss out into the dangerous waters to their family and their friends who are drowning. And they're trying to say, look, grab onto this. Let me help you. And so I've had a lot of people reaching out to me saying, hey, can I get the links to those videos? I really want to share them with somebody. I know somebody who's going down that path right now, and it's really difficult. Well, I found it interesting that that video series came out in 2019. Here we are 4 years later, and I've noticed that all of the influencers from that year, the people that I had in mind as I was making that video series, it's interesting to see their fruits today in 2023. Every single person that I had in mind when I made that video series has since produced one or more or all of the following fruits. Left the church, denounced Jesus Christ, became atheist, and ended up in prison. As I got thinking about those certain individuals, and as I reflected on a lot of the characteristics that they had in common, I noticed there was a pattern of being puffed up in pride, delighting in praise and recognition, always wanting to be in the spotlight, trying to be a big influencer in a big way, building their own kingdom here on the earth, but certainly not God's kingdom, and starting to create their own doctrines and philosophies. What's also interesting is a lot of these people have been in the news and in the headlines this past week, or have put themselves in the spotlight again in a big way on social media by coming out with some shocking news or some kind of announcement. So I find it interesting that they have all been surfacing this last week 4 years after I put out that video series, Hold to the Rod, where I put out those warnings and pointed out those red flags about these different individuals and these different offshoot groups that were pulling a lot of people off of the covenant path. And I remember saying in that video that people who have made a business out of doing this in that world of esoteric teachings, new age philosophies, energy work, all of that, these groups and these people who have made a business out of that, a business out of teaching people these ways, these teachings and philosophies, these will be the people that would be the least likely to walk away from all of that and head back towards the covenant path. I talked about how it's much easier as someone being influenced by them, someone who's just a follower, to pick up on those red flags and choose to walk away, versus somebody who's at the top of all of that, leading large multitudes of people in that direction. If it's become their purpose and they're making money off of that, it's become a business, it is very unlikely that they would let all of that go and renounce it all to head back towards the covenant path. And now I have seen 4 years later, every one of those people, every one of those groups produce all of those fruits that destroyed their testimony, broke all of their covenants, and led multitudes of other people to do the same. And the jets are flying over. But as I was talking with my sister about this, we were both saying, now is not the time to be leaving the covenant path. And I can't say that there ever is a time when you should do that. But I would say if ever there was a worse time, that would be right now. All of these people who have left their covenants, in other words, have left the ark, are now standing out in the flood. The rains are coming down, the earth is flooding, and they're no longer safely on the ark. I also don't think it's a coincidence that this week in our Come Follow Me studies, we have been learning about the wheat and the tares. As I always talk about in these videos, there always seems to be a pattern that what we are studying in our Come Follow Me always seems to parallel what's happening in the world around us. We can clearly see right now that the wheat has been gathered in and the tares have been bundled up, as the parable goes, ready to be burned. It's interesting to note in the parable that the Lord speaks about gathering first the tares. So first gathering the wicked together and binding them in bundles, but gathering the wheat into his barn, which I believe is symbolic of the ark or the temple. So on this topic, I received this comment in relation to the last video message. She wrote, I love your videos, but I agree with your friend in the end. In D&C 4568, it says, and it shall come to pass among the wicked that every man that will not take his sword against his neighbor must needs flee unto Zion for safety. There will come a time when the Antichrist will overpower the saints, and the only place where we will be safe is in Zion. If we look at the scriptures, so many times the Lord removes his people before he destroys the wicked. He will remove the wheat and burn the tares. He will still be with us, and we don't know exactly how it will look, but I'm preparing my mind and my kids for the day that the prophet tells us to pack up and meet at a certain place for safety. It will happen, so be ready to leave if we need to. The persecution and humbling is coming. This isn't a scary thing or a sad thing. It's been prophesied, and I'm excited for the day we get to all gather together in Zion. Hurrah for Israel. Now, I just want to say that I believe it will be a sad experience to witness destruction of the wicked. I don't think the Lord finds any joy in that whatsoever. And I also don't feel that it would be an exciting thing to experience or to witness. But yes, all the other things, the Lord returning, all of the miracles, those things are certainly exciting. Well, here's my response to this. I wrote, I shared in the video what I learned from studying our church doctrine. It says in the Teacher's Seminary Manual for Church History, in regards to Joseph Smith's quote, when he says that the time is soon coming when no man will have any peace but in Zion and her stakes. It counsels, be sure students understand that the blessings of Zion, including peace and safety, will be available not only in the city of Zion, but also in the stakes of Zion established throughout the world. I wrote, also, I think a lot of people confuse the capital city, New Jerusalem, which is in Jackson County, as being the whole of Zion. The land of Zion is much bigger than its capital city. The scriptures give us the dimensions for the city of Zion, which is equivalent to 1,379.5 miles, the same distance as from San Francisco to St. Louis. The city of Zion will encompass half of the United States. That's where a lot of us saints currently live. That's why we won't need to flee, because we live in Zion. We are protected in the stakes of Zion wherever they may be. Last is my favorite quote about this from Elder Holland. I remember when he gave this message at the General Conference in 2014. It was powerful. He talked about how the pattern in the scriptures was always the righteous people fleeing before God destroyed the wicked, but how that's no longer the Lord's plan for the saints. He said, the church of God will never again flee. It will never again leave in order to leave Haran, in order to leave Canaan, in order to leave Jerusalem, in order to leave England, in order to leave Kirtland, in order to leave Nauvoo, in order to go who knows where. No, as Brigham Young said, for us all, we have been kicked out of the frying pan into the fire, out of the fire into the middle of the floor. And here we are, and here we will stay. Of course, that statement wasn't a comment about the Salt Lake Valley only, or even the Wasatch Front generally. It became a statement for the members of the church all over the world. In these last days, in this our dispensation, we would become mature enough to stop running. We would become mature enough to plant our feet and our families and our foundations in every nation, kindred, tongue, and people permanently. Zion would be everywhere, wherever the church is. And with that change, one of the mighty changes of these last days, we no longer think of Zion as where we are going to live. We think of it as how we are going to live. So he's recognizing in this statement that in the early history of the church, Zion was a place, it was a location. It was to be in Missouri. And then, of course, it moved to Salt Lake. But he's saying in the last days, there was a change. And Zion is no longer a specific location. It's everywhere, all over the world, wherever the church is. So I wrote, our church has never taught that we will flee our stakes and go into hiding. Rather, people looking for peace and safety will flee to Zion stakes to find it. We will take in refugees from all over. Zion stakes are filled with the protecting power of God. No need to flee or be afraid. We stay in our stakes, Zion, and we shine our light. The call from the prophet is to build Zion, to enlarge its stakes. This is what I talked about in my last video message, but here I provided information from our church doctrine and our modern day apostles who are very specific about this. And we can see that the prophet's call to build Zion has already gone out. You can see right here, just alone in the titles of the previous and recent general conferences, there's that message, there's that call loud and clear. Bring forth Zion. Prepare the world for the Savior's second coming. And this quote here from President Nelson, he says, we live in the day that our forefathers have awaited with anxious expectation. We have front row seats to witness live what the prophet Nephi saw only in vision, that the power of the Lamb of God would descend upon the covenant people of the Lord, who were scattered upon all the face of the earth. And they were armed with righteousness and with the power of God in great glory. You, my brothers and sisters, are among those men, women, and children whom Nephi saw. The invitation to gather and bless those on both sides of the veil, build Zion, and prepare the world for our Savior's second coming includes each of us. That's the end of the quote. I think sometimes people overcomplicate the gospel, the doctrine, even the prophecies. And I think a lot of times people are expecting a physical brick and mortar building of Zion, and they're waiting for that call. But clearly, President Nelson has extended that call to build Zion, and this is what it looks like. He doesn't mention any fleeing or hiding. He only mentions building up where we are and shining our light for the world to see, and doing this all over the world. In the Bible dictionary under Zion, here's what it says. As the choice to come unto Christ is not a matter of physical location, it's a matter of individual commitments. People can be brought to the knowledge of the Lord without leaving their homelands. True, in the early days of the church, conversion often meant emigration as well. But now the gathering takes place in each nation. The Lord has decreed the establishment of Zion in each realm where He has given His saints their birth and nationality. Scripture foretells that the people shall be gathered home to the lands of their inheritance and shall be established in all their lands of promise. Every nation is the gathering place for its own people. The place of gathering for Brazilian saints is in Brazil. The place of gathering for Nigerian saints is in Nigeria. The place of gathering for Korean saints is in Korea, and so forth. Zion is the pure in heart. Zion is wherever righteous saints are. Publications, communications, and congregations are now such that nearly all members have access to the doctrines, keys, ordinances, and blessings of the gospel, regardless of their location. Spiritual security will always depend upon how one lives, not where one lives. Saints in every land have equal claim upon the blessings of the Lord. It continues, the revelations also speak of the cause of Zion in Doctrine and Covenants, section 6 and section 11. In a wider sense, all of North and South America are Zion. This is in reference to the land of Zion. It continues in repeating what the prophet has said. In the early days of this dispensation, church leaders counseled members to build up Zion by emigrating to a central location. Today, our leaders counsel us to build up Zion wherever we live. Members of the church are asked to remain in their native lands and help establish the church there. Many temples are being built all over the world, so Latter-day Saints throughout the world can receive temple blessings. Now, the quickest and most effective way to get rid of all of those weeds known as the tares, which are very toxic. They look just like wheat, and if you eat them, it is very poisonous. So the most effective and fastest way to destroy these dangerous weeds were to burn them. That was the only way to ensure the destruction of something so toxic. It would destroy the weed, the roots, and the seeds. It was the only way to cleanse that field. Now, there's a lot of symbolism in that, and if you've been studying your Come Follow Me this week, you've probably had a lot of thoughts and conversations about that. Now, what's interesting to me is a lot of these influencers, who I like to call modern-day Korahors, I believe are in the same position that Korahor was in. After being severely punished by God, he later confessed. He said, I always knew that there was a God. But behold, the devil hath deceived me, for he appeared unto me in the form of an angel, and said unto me, Go and reclaim this people, for they have all gone astray after an unknown God. And he said unto me, There is no God. Yea, and he taught me that which I should say. I believe that deep down, a lot of these people, no matter what it is they're saying right now, no matter what it is they're trumpeting to the world, I believe that deep down, they know. They know that there is a God. They know that Jesus Christ is their Savior and Redeemer. They know who He is. They know He's real. I believe they still have a testimony, but they have been deceived by the adversary and have allowed that deception to take root inside of them to the point where they are sold on those lies and they're trying to sell others on those same lies. But deep down, they know their lies. They doubt what it is they're doing. They doubt what it is they're teaching. And those seeds of truth from their covenants are still planted in their soul. They're still there. And every day they feel that. They feel that sort of tug of war inside their soul. I really believe that. I truly believe that when you have felt the Spirit testify truth to you, and you have entered into those covenants with the Lord, no matter what you say and do to convince yourself that none of that was true, deep down you know, because you once felt it. You received those powerful witnesses that that was truth. And just like the parable of the sower that we are also studying in this week's Come Follow Me, whatever type of soil we put our roots into will determine who we become. And just like in that parable, there are many who hear the word of God and it feels so right, it feels so true, it feels so good, and they want to take part in that. But as soon as something comes along that doesn't quite sit right with them, or maybe something offends them, whether it's a person or a doctrine within the church, they are quick to walk away from their covenants. We are seeing that happen right now. Now, one of these people who recently came out in the spotlight this last week and announced their reasons for leaving their covenants and leaving the gospel, leaving the church, and even renouncing Jesus Christ openly and publicly. As I reflected on the timeline of what this particular person had openly shared over the last 4 years, being an open book and posting so much on social media, this person had shared one bad choice after another, one dangerous decision after another that slowly, or you could say quickly, led to a complete loss of testimony and disconnection from not only their covenants and not only their family, but God over a period of 4 years. And it fits the pattern of so many others who have followed that same path, where they start by criticizing leaders of the church or criticizing doctrines. And then they start to bring in the philosophies of the world so they can be liked by more people in the world. And then those who are women start by removing their garments and saying, you know what, I don't need to wear these anymore. It's kind of a personal choice anyways, and I'm all about freeing my body and feeling liberated. And they jumped on that bandwagon. Remember when I talked about that movement a couple of years ago and the fruits that would come from that? Well, we're now seeing that happen right now. We're seeing the final result, the final fruits of a succession of all of those choices that we talked about right here in these videos on this channel. It went from removing their garments to jumping on board and loudly supporting the whole LGBTQ movement, all of that identity confusion, embracing that, supporting it, endorsing it. And then during a lot of that, these people put all of their trust and faith in something that wasn't God. Something else had become their religion. Something else had become what it is they worship. They were a believer of something else, that this something else would heal them and make their life better and bring them happiness and joy and produce miracles in their life. And they would constantly trumpet that and post about it publicly about this other thing that in essence was their savior. And what that did is it replaced the savior in their life. They didn't have a need for him and his atonement and his healing power when they had something else that was healing them, something else that was giving them miracles. This is that great deception that I talk about in the Hold to the Rod series. So here we are 4 years later, seeing the final end result, the final fruits of those choices of all of these influencers that started right around the time I made that video series. And I remember some of the things that led up to making that video series. A lot of those red flags for me, as I had explored that world, was hearing a lot of people say and teach, keep this knowledge that you're learning on the down low. You don't want this to get back to your spouse or your bishop or your stake president or your parents, because they won't understand. They won't understand this special mission that God has for you or these special gifts that God has blessed you with. They won't understand it. And so you can never open up about it. You have to keep it a secret, and nobody will ever understand you. You're always going to feel different because you have this special knowledge and you have these special gifts and abilities. I'm sure to a lot of you this sounds familiar. And that always reminded me of Lucifer with Adam and Eve, when in the garden he said to them, "Father is coming, quick, hide, or he'll see your nakedness." Because of their choices, they fell, and Satan was trying to convince them to hide. It reminded me of that same concept, and that is always a tactic of the adversary. He wants us to be afraid and to feel ashamed or to feel guilty, to feel all alone, to feel alienated, to separate ourselves from everyone else and everything that is good and true, and to feel like we're the black sheep, we're the odd one out, we're all alone. And then he works with those feelings and does what he does. And I remember clearly hearing some of these people say, if the day ever comes where my priesthood leaders ask me to choose between these spiritual gifts that I have or this special mission that I have and the church, I'm going to have to choose my special mission and my special gifts, and God will understand. And I remember that felt so weird to me. That didn't feel like something that the Lord would ask anyone to do. It went against everything that the Lord teaches in his own doctrine. And to me, that was a huge red flag that a lot of people fell for and continue to fall for, even in 2023. And a lot of these people feel the need to always justify why what they do is okay. And they continue to pull quotes from church history or doctrine or scriptures to support what it is they're doing. And I always feel that if what you're doing is what the Lord really wants you to be doing, you should never have to feel the need to justify it. You should never have to feel ashamed or embarrassed around other members of the church. And so right now, I've seen a lot of these people starting to resurface again, and I'm seeing a lot of people start to revisit this world again and develop a curiosity about these influencers. And to me, that represents getting tangled up with the tares or planting your roots in a thorny or stony soil, right? Where your testimony is going to be choked or you're not going to be spiritually fed. So Satan is trying hard right now. He is pulling out all the stops to give it one final push in this final minute. I have personally noticed over the last few weeks a huge explosion of inappropriate images and videos popping up everywhere. I've never seen anything like it before. It doesn't matter what time of day, it could be morning, it could be afternoon, it doesn't matter where I am, it's just popping up everywhere like it's the norm. It's almost to the point where there's days where I feel like I'm being targeted or attacked personally by the adversary. But just like Joseph with Potiphar's wife, I don't even give it a second of my time. I turn and I run. Now, what's interesting to me is I've been revisiting the conference talks from the last general conference in preparation for the upcoming general conference. One of those talks stood out to me, and there was a scripture in there in the footnotes of President Nelson's talk, What is True? I love that. It was a scripture that he listed, and when I clicked on the footnotes in that scripture, it took me to Colossians 2, where it says, touch not, taste not, handle not. So don't even look at it, don't touch it, don't taste it, don't smell it. Immediately, remove yourself far from it. This talk was all about false prophets and false doctrines in our day. And I loved it when he said, many on earth today are only kept from the truth because they know not where to find it. Some would have us believe that truth is relative, that each person should determine for himself or herself what is true. Such a belief is but wishful thinking for those who mistakenly think they will not also be accountable to God. God is the source of all truth, and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints embraces all truth that God conveys to his children, whether learned in a scientific laboratory or received by direct revelation from him. Now, I love that because, again, with a lot of these influencers, one thing that so many of them have in common is when people question them about these doctrines that they're teaching, they say, well, that's what feels right to me. That's what I choose to believe, or that's my truth. And again, that's just another code word for deception. Truth is truth. There is no my truth, or what makes sense to me or seems right to me. If it's true, it's true. And that's what President Nelson is saying in this conference address. Now, how crazy is it that after this conference message, we're seeing that right now sort of escalating and building up prior to this next general conference that's this coming weekend. It's like all of these cohorts are surfacing and shouting out their truth. And when people question them about it, the only answer they can give is, well, that's what I believe. That's my truth. This is what works for me. So they've sort of created their own truth, their own doctrine to support their current lifestyle and their current choices. And a lot of people aren't buying it. They're seeing right through it because they know that truth is not relative, that we don't create truth. It comes from God. Well, in the footnotes of those scriptures of President Nelson's talk, it went on to reference Doctrine and Covenants 76, where it says, these are they who are not valiant in the testimony of Jesus. They do not receive a crown, so the terrestrial kingdom. And then in verse 81, those of the telestial glory received not the gospel and not a testimony of Jesus. So I'm thinking right now about some of these people who went from being on the covenant path and entering into all of those celestial covenants. All they had to do was endure. All they had to do was stay on that path. And it's crazy to see how they made that jump from believing in God and believing in Jesus Christ and being a child of the covenant to dropping down to no testimony of the gospel or of Jesus Christ. All the while trying to convince everyone that they're happy and that they feel more liberated and free than they've ever felt before. And I've always believed if you're truly happy and you're truly at peace, you don't feel the need to always have to convince other people that you feel that way. It just shows in your countenance and through your actions. It's a part of your fruits. Okay, so let's go back to talking about a lot of the things that are going on right now with riots or protesting, places in the country or throughout the world where anger is sort of building up. So I came across this video a couple weeks ago where this guy was talking about the history of music, and it's a music YouTube channel where he talks about all things music. And this particular video was a documentary he put together about the evolution of British music. And he talked about these different movements. He talked about these different revolutions. And I loved the way that he explained it because I could relate that with what's going on today in the world. So he talked about these times in history when the pendulum was so far swung in a certain direction. And it was as extreme as it could go to the point where people were just getting tired of it. And usually it had to do with politics and it had to do with culture. When people got tired of that and wanted change, a band would rise up and create that revolution and send the pendulum swinging in the opposite direction. And then after 10, 15, 20 years or so, that pendulum being in the other direction for so long would create another revolution because people would get tired of that and they would send it swinging back into the other direction. And it's just kind of been a pattern throughout history where the pendulum just swings back and forth, and it's a slow movement. But once it's been far enough in one direction, there's always somebody who is bound to rise up and send it swinging back in the other direction. So he was talking about the evolution of British music. He was talking about the 70s, and during this time there was the Vietnam War here in America and the rise of the hippies, which a lot of people embraced because they felt like there was no harm in that and that the hippies just wanted peace and love. But then it got to a point where people started to see through that. The cons started to outweigh the pros of the hippie movement. And the hippies started to be seen as an entitled group of people who just wanted everything for free. Whether it was love or whether it was stuff, they felt a sense of entitlement. They would go wherever they wanted, camp wherever they wanted, climb over fences and sneak into whatever they wanted, but they never felt like they had to contribute and give back to society, that they never had to work for anything or pay for anything. They just laid around and, you know the saying, eat, drink, and be merry. That was pretty much their motto. That's what they lived by. Those were their values. And over time, people started to get really bothered by that. What was once celebrated and sort of the popular thing to support ended up taking its toll on society, and people started to get annoyed by it. And according to this documentary, that's what gave rise to punk music. A group of people rose up who were tired of all of the hippie music and the popular music of the day and expressed their anger and rage towards all of this about politics and about culture in the form of their music. And when these bands would rise up, all of these people would gravitate towards that message or that group and say, yes, this is what we want. You're expressing how the majority of the people feel, but have been too afraid or too tired to say it. So you're going to be the group that liberates everyone from the place that we're stuck in. So anyways, he explained it that way, and he did it with each band that would come along and send the pendulum in a different direction towards a different style of music, and how it just kind of went back and forth. But what was interesting is he said, at least in the UK, since the late 90s, there haven't been any bands to come forward and send the pendulum swinging, but that the pendulum is definitely stuck, and there haven't been any new groups or bands rising up to create change in music. Now that stood out to me because I felt the symbolism in that with everything that's going on in the world. He said something that stood out. He said, so for those of you who are watching this, if you're the next greatest band and you want to change music history, take a look around right now. Look at what's going on in society and in pop culture. What is it that everybody is annoyed with right now? Is there something that everyone's just so done with? It's just so overkill, and they're ready for change. They're ready for someone to come in and say what everyone else is thinking, but they're too afraid to say it. Because if you can figure that out, that will be the key to your success, to sending the pendulum swinging again, and you'll be the next band that rises up and changes music history. Well, anyways, that stood out to me because right away it came to my mind what that might be. And what's interesting is I'm seeing little pockets here and there of people who are ready to speak up right now against the cultural norm that has gotten to be too much, and people are just done with it. And I believe that to be the gender identity crisis and everything surrounding that whole movement. Whether it's gender identity, sexual preference, you can group it all into one giant elephant in the room where people are tired of just accepting it or ignoring it. They're ready for that elephant to just leave the room. And I'm going to add to that all of the esoteric and new age philosophies and practices. Basically everything that makes up Babylon, that great and abominable church. These are the beliefs, practices, and systems that we see being promoted all throughout Hollywood and the entertainment industry, the music industry, and I think people are starting to get tired of it. all of that talk about manifesting and energies and chakras and the universe, all of these terms that have just become so overkill and are really making a lot of people cringe when they hear or see it. So it feels like we're on the brink of the next sort of revolution where people send the pendulum swinging again. And I'm seeing evidence of that. I've been seeing a lot of articles and videos popping up lately talking about how this next younger generation is starting to crave religion, that they're getting tired of secularism and what the world has to offer, and they're looking for more concrete truths and answers and stability, and so they're starting to look towards religion. My eyes and my ears lit up when I started seeing and hearing this, because for so long we've been hearing the opposite, and we're used to hearing how the youth don't always want to follow in their parents' footsteps. They often want to rebel. But what's interesting is when a group of people have been rebelling for so long, that rebellion becomes the norm. And when something stays the norm for so long, it's no longer considered rebellion because it's the norm, it's the standard, it's what everybody's doing. So when people get tired of that, then they begin to rebel against what was the old rebellion, which sends the pendulum swinging back to what it was the prior generation was rebelling against. So that becomes what the current young generation wants, because it's the opposite of what the generation before them supports. I think that makes a lot of sense. So basically, the younger generation of today is tired of what the world has to offer. They're starting to get tired of secularism, New Age philosophies, basically Babylon. They don't want to be like everyone else. They don't want to be the majority. And if you compare that to music, that's exactly what the punk movement was. It was people who didn't want to blend in and be like the majority. They wanted to be different. They wanted to stand out because they were fed up. In fact, if you follow the evolution of rock music, you will see these different revolutions or movements where a generation was trying to rebel against the generation before. And really it started with Elvis. Then here you see we have the hippies with that 70s classic rock, punk rock. You could even throw in some 80s hair bands with that metal and 80s rock. And then you have the 90s alternative grunge rock. But the sound, culture, and image of each of these different rock revolutions reflected what it was this particular generation was rebelling against. So applying that to where we're at today as a society, we can see that this younger generation is starting to become tired, annoyed, and fed up with what the world has to offer, with what the world teaches about identity and gender and marriage and all of that. Because those things have become the norm and everybody was in a way sort of pushed into this narrative, the younger generation is starting to want something different. They're getting tired of that. It's no longer different, exciting, edgy, or rebellious to them, and they're ready for change from what it is they feel they're being expected to conform to. So right now, with all of this gender identity and confusion that first started out with all of these pros, the way that the world was spinning it, here's all the reasons why you want to support this, because it's going to liberate everyone, it's going to make everyone free, it's going to make people happier, it's going to advance us as a society, and we can better progress because we won't be stuck in our old-fashioned ways, right? But now that that's become the norm, this younger generation is getting tired of it. And we're seeing right now with a lot of women's sports that women are getting tired of it. They're tired of transgender opponents taking away those opportunities from them. It seems to be continually in the headlines. Men who identify as women taking first place in all of these women's competitions. People are starting to get tired of that, and they're getting tired of having to understand and know and identify everyone's correct pronouns. They're starting to feel like all of these things that were supposed to make society better are actually making life more difficult, more unpleasant, and people are getting annoyed. So even though I should have been surprised by this article, it actually made a lot of sense that the younger generations of today would start swinging towards the other direction and having that hunger and desire for change, for traditional values, for morals. In fact, while editing this video yesterday, as I had the TV on in the morning because my sister and her family are in New York and they were on the Today Show, she wanted us to turn it on and see them waving into the camera, which we did. And suddenly right after that, this story pops up and it caught my attention when I saw this image, and it was about a book. There was an author being interviewed who is a professor at Yale University, and he was talking about this book he had co-written called Journey Toward a Life Worth Living. Now, it caught my attention also because they were interviewing him in a church. That's something you just don't see very often on TV, on the news, on these national morning and talk shows. And what was interesting is they talked about his childhood and what sort of led him on the path to discover what it was he discovered that inspired him to write this book. And he said that as a teenager, he was searching for the meaning of life. He was searching for purpose and what would make life meaningful. And he found those answers in the study of religion. So he talks about the pros of religion and the pros and the blessings that come from pain and suffering, how it's not always a bad thing. This is something that the youth of today's generations aren't used to hearing. And so to me, this was very refreshing. And then they interviewed a few of the students who are taking his class at Yale University, and they said that the class has been eye-opening, that it has really changed their mind and perspective about things that they used to not be interested in, and it taught them to be better listeners, especially around people who are very different than them, that they normally would have no interest in listening to. They've been able to have more of an open mind and try to understand what makes people choose their choices. The professor even quoted a scripture from the New Testament while being interviewed by celebrity Maria Shriver. So there it was again, another witness of this hunger for talk about religion and starting to see religion again in a positive light. How people are starting to turn towards that as the pendulum begins to swing. Because what religion offers is structure. It offers stability and organization. Everything that's lacking right now in our society where anything goes. There is no organization. There is no structure or stability. What there is a lot of confusion and people feeling less free to express how they feel about all of this. So I keep seeing this pop up. And then here's a story that made headlines this week that ties into all of this. This celebrity connected to the Kardashian family, who has gone by the name of Black China, has decided to give her life to Christ, and she has sought religion. Apparently, she got baptized last year on her birthday, and she's been on this journey of removing her tattoos, reversing her plastic surgery, and removing all of her fillers and implants, and walking away from her main source of income that she said she felt was not pleasing to God. In a recent interview, she said that finding religion kickstarted what she's described as her life-changing journey. So there it was again, life-changing journey. Journey towards a life worth living, which to me is that journey on the covenant path, which eventually, when you're making the right choices, they all point in that direction to that path. In fact, right when I just said that, that particular voice recording was 14.4 seconds long. There's that pay attention number 144, the gathering of Israel. We're seeing that happen right now as we see this interest picking up speed and gaining momentum for organized religion. And now this is fascinating. So about a week before I even found this story, this screenshot right here, this is a screenshot of a YouTube video that popped up in my feed, and there was that 113. So I felt the need to take a screenshot. It's my pay attention number. I felt the need to watch it, and I didn't quite understand why I needed to watch it. It was all about genetics, which I love, but it was about people who sometimes can pick up genes that don't seem to make sense. So this was the story of two boys that were brothers who both had white parents from Ireland, but they were born black. And they had a DNA test done and found out that they were indeed the children of both biological white parents. So this is something that happens every now and then. Well, now I'm seeing it. Two keywords that stand out on the screenshot: angel and white. It says Everybody Hates Angel. That's the name of the YouTube channel. And then there's the word white. Biological father is also white. Angel, white. Pay attention. 113. Third day power in this 11th hour. 3rd Nephi chapter 11. This is all a part of that transformation and becoming a people who are ready to meet the Savior when he comes. Pretty incredible. And her story continues to make headlines as people are really amazed at this journey that she's on and this transformation and how she's so open and vocal about it. She's now going by her legal name, Angela White. And I thought that was interesting that her legal given name, Angela White, how that name White is so symbolic of who she was before she became Black China and who she's trying to become now. Now, the name Angela is a form of the word angel or angelic, and of course, the color white symbolizes purity. Now, isn't it interesting that the word China comes from the ancient Chinese dynasty named Qin? That's how we pronounce it in English. In French, China is spelled Chine and pronounced sin. This is where the word sin comes from. The color black often represents darkness, so you have this dark sin or black sin versus her legal name, who she's becoming now, which is Angel White. Names truly are important because we become our names. They become our identity. To me, it's sort of symbolic of what happens when we're on the covenant path and we take on a new name in Christ and we become born again and we give up our old life and our old ways for something new, for something different, for something better. We walk away from the world and we step into the things of God's kingdom. And I've talked about that before years ago in past videos, how when people change their names or they start going by a nickname, oftentimes it seems like it affects their identity. It affects lots of things about them, and they start to become a different person. And how I've seen that with actors and musicians who sign a deal and decide to change their name to help out their career, and it ends up changing their whole personality to where they become a completely different person. In fact, it even talked about that in that documentary about the evolution of punk music. And it talked about a certain band where once the band members formed their band and wrote their hit album, they all decided to change their names to these names that sounded really unpleasant and sort of scary. And their personality and nature started to change to better fit that new name. So that reminded me of President Nelson's conference address from last year, where he talked all about our identity, how we need to remember who we are and what our name is. We are children of God, children of the covenant, disciples of Jesus Christ. And when you know your identity, and that's how you refer to yourself, your very nature, your countenance, your personality changes to fit that name or title. Names are so important. They shape our identity. Clearly, Satan has been the head of this whole identity crisis that we have seen plaguing society over the last few years. And the timing of President Nelson's message last year was not a coincidence. So it's interesting to see all of these people hungering for that. They're hungering for change. They're not finding happiness in the world. They're ready to look somewhere else for their happiness, to feel true freedom and true liberation. And I feel like we're on the brink of a revolution, which reminds me of that prophecy within our church, where in the last days, the women of the world will turn to the women of the church for influence, to find change and happiness, and that the women of the church in the last days will influence these women of the world in positive and happy ways. And so I feel like that's what's swinging into motion right now. Now, this headline caught my attention last week. It was talking about how within Christianity here in the United States, a lot of Christians are starting to notice that their churches are growing darker. That as their churches begin to turn more and more into rock concerts, where everything's dark and there's disco balls and laser lights, that has drawn in a lot of people into these mega churches for all of the wrong reasons. And people are finally starting to get tired of that. And they're starting to say, I go to church and everything's dark, the lights are out, there's no windows. I couldn't even read my scriptures if I wanted to because I can't see the pages because it's so dark. And everything's so loud and it's pulsating with the electric guitars and the drums and the music and the dancing. And there's so much stimulation, so much noise, so much distraction. And everybody's shouting and singing and clapping their hands and storming the stage. And there's just so much going on that it's starting to become chaotic and confusing. And there's no order. There's no still small voice. There's no peace, no calmness. That entertainment factor that was originally pulling in so many people is now starting to become the very reason that people are wanting to leave because they're not feeling that peace in their life. They swarmed to these churches and got baptized, and it was really exciting, and they felt like they were a part of something, but come to find out over time, they feel like they're still a lost sheep in a dark sea of other lost sheep. Nobody knows their name. Nobody's checking in on them and helping them out and watching over them. It doesn't feel like a family. It's just too big. That's what this article was all about, and it was interesting reading the comments. It went both ways. There were a lot of people who said, well, I love the darkness. I feel Jesus most when I'm in the dark. I feel more comfortable being in the dark. I don't like a lot of people to see me, and I don't like to see a lot of other people. So I feel like I can better hide in the dark. So you had people who were part of that camp, and then you had other people who said, I want a church with windows. I want a church where light is pouring in. I want a church where the music calms me down. I want a church where I can hear the whisperings of the Spirit. I want a church where the people know me, where it's small enough that it feels like family. I want a church where I can actually see my scriptures, where I can go to be taught, where people know my name and they notice when I'm not there. And so you had two different camps kind of going back and forth. And to me, again, that reminded me of the parable of the wheat and the tares. You have this group of people, the wheat, who are walking away from all of this, looking for something better. Thinking about all of this has had me contemplating lately, making a series of videos all about what it is I love about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Because as I continue to see these comments, when I see what it is they're complaining about and what it is they're looking for, I'm thinking, that's what we have. That's what the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has to offer. Everything it is you're looking for and you're wanting, that's what we have. We have order. We have organization. We have authority, so there is no confusion. We have modern day revelation, ordained apostles and prophets. We have calmness and clarity and peace. We have ministering. We have that light and brightness, covenants and promises. This restored gospel offers incredible blessings for living a consecrated life, setting yourself apart from the world, being different and being blessed. This restored gospel offers peace and hope and happiness in Jesus Christ. It offers a clear path. There's no confusion whatsoever. And it's very simple. You don't get baptized and then become lost or forgotten. You're given a calling and a purpose and opportunities to serve and grow and learn and teach anyways. I would love to put out some videos just about that. So that's the plan. Stay tuned. Anyways, I'm seeing a lot more videos popping up of people who left the church who have come back. And more continue to come back. It almost feels like right now, for every person who is leaving, someone else is coming back. And the one thing that they all have in common, all of these people who are coming back, the common pattern is they're saying, I thought when I was a member of the church, I didn't have freedom, that I was restricted, that there were too many rules, and it was just too hard and made me too different from the world. And it was just too hard because it was so different from the world. I didn't have answers to all of my questions, so I felt like that meant I just needed to leave. Well, then when I left, I realized that the world didn't have anything better to offer me, that I felt more lonely, more confused, completely lost. And I started to realize that even though I didn't have all the answers when I belonged to the church, there were lots of times where my testimony was strengthened. I did have tender mercies and prayers that had been answered. I did experience miracles at times in my life that strengthened my faith. And having walked away from all of that, I wasn't experiencing any of that. My questions still weren't being answered, but now I wasn't even experiencing blessings or miracles. And deep down, I knew that was the truth. I knew that that's where I had felt most happy. And it took me walking away from all of that to recognize it. When I noticed the contrast of my life before and after, it was a stark enough contrast that I knew I wouldn't be happy until I came back. So that has been the common theme that all of these people have been saying that come back to the church. They learned over time that you don't have to have all of your questions answered and have everything make perfect sense in order to be happy. That you can be happy line upon line and precept upon precept, one day at a time. Here a little, there a little, on the Lord's timeline, in simple ways, because the gospel is very simple. And a lot of times we try to overcomplicate it. And it takes people realizing how complicated the world actually is to recognize and appreciate the simplicity of the restored gospel of Jesus Christ. Okay, so now I want to quickly talk about Stake Conference. Wow, Stake Conference was amazing. We had it 2 weeks ago, and I'm a part of our Stake committee that's over our new Stake website. And so I wrote a summary of highlights all about our Stake Conference, and that's the first time we've ever done that. So I'm going to have a link to it down below because it's a lot and I don't have time to talk about it in today's video. And my next video message is going to be about General Conference. So I'm not going to have a lot of time to discuss what was talked about at our Stake Conference. But a couple things that stood out to me that I'll share right now is, first of all, how open and bold our Area 70 was when he spoke to our stake, and especially to the youth. And there were a lot of questions about confusing things and gender identity. And I thought it was so refreshing how bold and clear our Area 70 was in answering those questions. And I feel like the youth were craving that. I feel like that's what they were wanting to hear. That's what they were hoping to hear, because all too often when they ask those questions, the kind of answers they get are, well, it's okay, we won't worry about it, and just focus on your testimony and work on that, and just be positive and move forward. And so I think during these confusing times, oftentimes the youth end up even more confused with the approach that some of their family members or people in their community takes on that subject, and it just leaves them with even more questions. And so I loved how direct and honest and bold our Area 70 was. He just got right to the point, spoke from our doctrine, didn't sugarcoat anything, and didn't come across as overly sensitive, just was very blunt and honest and to the point. And then he just moved on from there. I remember my younger daughter commented on that and she said, wow, his answer really stood out to me because I haven't heard anybody give an answer like that before. Usually if you give an answer like that, you're canceled. Society cancels you or blocks you or censors you or whatever. And so oftentimes people are afraid to teach doctrines and truths because they don't want to offend anybody. They don't want it to be taken the wrong way. They don't want to have it come back in a negative way towards them. In this day and age that we're living in, people are so used to that fear of if you say the wrong thing, it could ruin your career, it could ruin education opportunities, all kinds of opportunities. So it's better just to be quiet and not say anything at all, or to just go along with everybody else. And as that approach is taken, you can see these false doctrines starting to creep in to organizations and institutions that once used to keep all of that out. So I think the youth I think it was very refreshing for the youth to hear someone being so bold and unapologetic about those truths. That felt more like love, because when you really love someone, you're going to speak truth to them and you're going to help steer them on a good path. And when you don't care about someone or you don't really have a love for someone, you just say what it is you think they want to hear, right? So there's a difference. When you truly care about someone, you're not going to sugarcoat things or tell them just what they want to hear. You're going to speak truth and you're really going to try to help them. And I feel like that's what the youth today, this younger generation, is craving. They're craving truth, because with truth comes love. You really feel like someone cares about you and loves you when they're not afraid to speak truth, versus someone who is just regurgitating what's become politically correct, right? Anyways, there was an absolute theme at our state conference, and it was so incredible. It was a theme of faith, hope, charity, and trusting in the Lord. But there was also a lot of references to Noah and the ark. So we had a musical number from the primary hymn book. It's the song called Build an Ark. And the verse that stood out to me reads, I will build an ark before it starts to rain. I will follow the Lord and do all things in His name. I'll prepare every needful thing. I will walk in the righteous ways. When the rain starts to fall on me, I'll be ready for that day. Now, I love that because there has been so much of a theme lately of Noah and the ark. And definitely right now, there is a repetitive message of flooding. Now, there was a brother in our stake who gave an excellent talk that followed that song. And he talked about how Noah was questioned and mocked for building an ark when there was no rain and the weather was fine, there was sunshine. So people thought it was odd he was building an ark. They questioned him and made fun of him. And he pointed out how the miracle of the ark followed the faith that was manifested by its building. The action of building the ark generated the miracle. I loved that. And he gave experiences throughout his life of times when he was building his ark by doing all the things that he was supposed to be doing to stay on the covenant path. So when the floods came at those times in his life, he was prepared to deal with them because he had been building his ark. And he compared that to times in his life where he got off the path and stopped building his ark. So when the floods came, he wasn't prepared to handle them. And those were much darker times in his life. And lately, with all of the storms and the crazy weather that we've been having, making the skies so dark all the time, and all of this talk about the churches growing darker, and then all of the flooding that we're experiencing right now, all of the rain and the snow that keeps coming, and how here in the United States, we have flooding on the West Coast and we have flooding on the East Coast. We have flooding all throughout the world. So many places where they're underwater right now. And it really feels like we're at this peak time where there's so much darkness and storms that preparation of building your ark is sure coming in handy right now, right? The people who are watching it rain are no longer questioning the people who have been building their ark. They're now looking to those people for hope. They're wanting to be a part of that. And the next day on Sunday, another brother in our stake gave a talk, and he brought up the same theme of the ark, and he referenced the song and the talk from the day before, and he asked, when is the best time to start building your ark? And he said, the best time is right now. And this was one of my favorite talks from our state conference from our Area 70. So I'll just read what I wrote up. Elder Checketts began by sharing examples of how words can change meaning. The word ignorant means uninformed, but in Utah, that has taken on a different definition over time to mean rude. Elder Checketts pointed out how the definition of faith has also changed over time to mean a set of beliefs. If a person can't make everything add all the way up, they set their faith aside. However, Elder Checketts informed the younger generations that older generations saw faith differently. Because of this, they didn't experience a faith crisis epidemic like we are seeing today. For them, all the gaps didn't need to be filled in. They could still experience faith in between the gaps, and we can too. Elder Checketts recalled telling his kids at various times in their life, during various occasions, we aren't here for the food. He said, likewise, we can apply this principle to account when Christ gave bread from heaven and taught that he is the bread, and whosoever comes unto him shall never hunger. He also taught, he that eateth my flesh and drinketh my blood dwelleth in me, and I in him. Elder Checketts pointed out that many didn't understand this teaching, and in John chapter 6, verse 66, and he put emphasis on the 666, we read, from that time many of his disciples went back and walked no more with him. They had been offended. Jesus asked his remaining disciples if they too would leave him, to which Simon Peter responded, Lord, to whom shall we go? Thou hast the words of eternal life, and we believe and are sure that thou art that Christ, the Son of the living God. Elder Checketts then referenced 3 Nephi 26, when Mormon says, and now there cannot be written in this book even 100th part of the things which Jesus did truly teach unto the people. And if it so be that they will not believe these things, then shall the greater things be withheld from them unto their condemnation. Behold, I was about to write them, all which were engraven upon the plates of Nephi. But the Lord forbade it, saying, I will try the faith of my people. Elder Checketts mentioned that the sealed portion of the plates fills in all the gaps. How easy it would have been for the Lord to give us all the answers in the Book of Mormon. However, he chose not to. He chose to try our faith. The Book of Mormon is meant to try our faith. Will we still believe when all the gaps are not yet filled in? If we choose to believe, we will qualify for the greater light. The gaps are then filled in, not to help us believe, but as a result of our belief. Elder Checketts said that faith, being the first principle and ordinance of the gospel, is a nod to our agency. He testified that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is the right bus that brings us home. And of course, the hymn that we sang at conference was hymn number 113. There's that number again. Our Savior's love, which is what we read about in 3 Nephi chapter 11. His love is that third day power in this 11th hour. Anyways, I have a link down below if you want to check out my stake conference. It was incredible. I loved every talk. The messages were so inspired and so applicable to everything that's going on right now. Now back to this topic of all of this rain and snow. So a lot of you have noticed that there have been some headlines popping up in the last week, especially here in Utah, pertaining to breaking records versus 40 years ago. So the first time I saw it was actually in a news article about California. They experienced a tornado in LA. Here's a screenshot that caused a lot of damage. Now, in this particular article, it said that the last time they had a tornado of this magnitude with this level of damage was 40 years ago in 1983. Literally the next day, a headline pops up here in Utah saying just about the same thing, that the last time Utah experienced this much snow, like what we're seeing right now, was 40 years ago in 1983. So right away, that number 40 stood out to everyone. The first thing that comes to mind with the number 40 and weather is Noah and the ark. It rained for 40 days and 40 nights. The next thing that comes to mind is the children of Israel wandering in the wilderness for 40 years, because there you have years. With Noah, it was just days. Another example that comes to mind is Christ fasting for 40 days right before he began his ministry. It's as though that fasting activated that power that enabled him to perform all of those miracles and do the work that he needed to do. Fasting always represents cleansing. So Christ was cleansing his vessel to prepare him to do his Father's work. Now, Noah was preparing to do his Father's work. He was building an ark. And then came the cleansing, 40 days and 40 nights, and the earth was cleansed of all wickedness. The children of Israel wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. It cleansed that entire generation of disbelief. And when that disbelieving generation was gone, when they had passed away, the next generation was a generation of believers. And they were able to receive that miracle and enter the promised land. This reminds me of what President Nelson said, how we live in that day that Nephi saw in a vision when the power of the Lamb of God would descend upon the covenant people of the Lord who were scattered upon all the face of the earth, and they were armed with righteousness and with the power of God in great glory. So what's the promised land? It's Zion. And according to Nephi, the covenant people at this time in our day are scattered all over the face of the earth, armed with that power and glory of God. So just like the incredible miracles that the Savior performed after his 40-day fasting, and remember, where did he fast? He fasted in the wilderness. The children of Israel wandered in the wilderness. Something about being in the wilderness for 40 days and 40 nights for 40 years. It definitely has to do with cleansing and also preparing a righteous people in order to manifest great miracles by the power of God. And this is also what happened with Noah. It rains for 40 days and 40 nights. You could look at the water as a sort of wilderness. And then eventually they come back to land with a prepared people, a prepared family, ready to build God's kingdom. So could this 40 years that we're hearing about in the news right now in our day be symbolic of what's to come, of what lies ahead, that we are these people ready to manifest the power of God in great glory here on the earth all over the world? There was that number 311 on my video right as I said that. Pay attention, right? That third day power in the 11th hour that I always talk about seems to coincide with cleansing. It makes me think of Queen Esther, how she and her people fasted for 3 days and on the third day received the miracle. There's a lot of miracles all throughout the scriptures that happen on the third day. And cleansing seems to be synonymous with the number 40 all throughout scriptures. So here we are at the end of this 40-year period where we're now having a repeat. We're breaking these records and it's making headlines. And it's with things that symbolize cleansing. We have tornadoes and flooding, rain and snow. It feels very symbolic that we're going into this period where there's going to be cleansing. And Come Follow Me right now, we're studying all about that. We're studying about the cleansing of the wheat and the tares, the burning of the tares. The repeated messages of Noah and the ark are all about cleansing. All of the rain and the snow just feels so symbolic of cleansing. As much as we hear about all the crazy things going on in the world and all of the wicked people, whether it's corporations or Hollywood or whatever it is, as much as we hear about that, at the same time, there's also a lot of people who are leaving corporations and Hollywood and the world because they're tired of the wickedness. They're tired of the darkness. They're looking for light. They're looking for cleansing. And it feels like all of this is symbolic of that. Everything that's going on in the spiritual is being manifested in the physical through natural disasters and stories in the headlines. It seems to be a manifestation that we're starting to see that victory of that battle of good versus evil. People are tired of the evil. They're realizing that it's full of empty promises. It's not offering them anything. It's not making their lives better. And they're starting to walk away from that. And so the adversary is really stepping up his game. And as he's stepping up his game, you can feel the effect of that all over the world through the natural disasters, everything that's going on. You can just feel it. Things on the battlefield are getting real. My daughter Cambry and I were just talking about this morning, how last year we both had dreams right around the same time of this valley being flooded by so much water. And this was during a drought. This was during probably the peak of the drought when it just didn't seem like it could get any worse. We both had a dream right around that time that the Great Salt Lake filled up with so much water that it flooded the valley. And I talked about this in a video last year. And in her dream, she saw a giant hand come out of heaven and move all the water out of the way and push it to the other ends of the valley. And in my dream, the whole face of the land had changed. We suddenly had mountains where there weren't mountains, and everything just seemed to change overnight, but it was for the better. It's like we went to bed and everything was awful. There was no water, there was famine and drought, and we woke up to this beautiful new world where everything was wonderful and peaceful and beautiful. And so she reminded me about those dreams and how they're starting to make a lot more sense now than they did last year. Okay, so now I want to end on the topic of blessings. So around the time of my last video message, a friend of mine shared with me out where she lives, they had a stake conference, and the stake president promised the people of their stake that if they started to work on their family history and put that first, make that a priority in their life, doing family history and taking those names to the temple, that all of their debts would be cleared. That's a pretty powerful promise. I can only guess and imagine that in her stake, there must be an issue of a lot of debt. There must be a lot of people who are experiencing financial problems and have a lot of debt that they can't pay. And the stake president probably fasted and prayed about it and received counsel from the Lord that if the people would put the things of his kingdom first, which remember President Nelson recently told us that the most important thing we could be doing right now is gathering Israel on both sides of the veil, but especially with family history work and completing that work in the temple. And we've heard over and over, if we would put those things first, everything else in our life will fall into place. Everything will work out. We just have to reprioritize. So he gave this bold promise, and she talked about how amazing it's been as she's been increasing her family history efforts, how things have just been starting to work out financially for their family, and they've been experiencing a lot of tender mercies and financial blessings here and there, and it's just been wonderful. This is interesting because at my last activity days that we had here at my home, I did an activity all about family history, and I remember thinking, as I was planning it, I don't know if this is the best idea because the particular group of girls that we have this year, they have a lot of energy and they like to do things where they're active and they're continually being stimulated. If there's ever a moment of downtime, things get pretty crazy pretty fast. So I remember thinking, oh no, what if as I talk about family history, I lose their interests and I lose their attention and it's a complete failure. So I had all these ideas to kind of make it more complicated, make it more fun. And at the last minute, I just kept having this feeling, you know what, keep it simple. Just simple and to the point. Just talk about family history, nothing else. You don't have to turn it into anything else. So that's what I did. I kept it very simple, and I had all the girls sitting in my kitchen, and I gave everybody a family tree, and I just started telling them how much I love family history. And from there, I shared some personal experiences, and from there, I had them fill out their own little family trees. And you know what? It was so incredible because this was probably the most calm these girls have ever been at any of our activities so far since January. This activity that required them to sit the whole time in a chair and listen was actually the most calming activity we've ever had. So I was amazed. I couldn't believe how interested these girls were to hear about family history. They were eager to learn about it, and their eyes lit up as I shared stories with them and I taught them all about it. To me, that was a huge witness that this younger generation is so hungry to do this work. They want to learn about it. They want to know how to do it. They want to participate in it. This is what their generation has been reserved for. This is their purpose. It was so awesome, you guys. Now, right around the same time, I had another experience happen that was another witness of the importance of family history. So I was cleaning my room on a Sunday, and I picked up a book and moved it across my dresser. And as I did that, a piece of paper fell out of it that I was probably using as a bookmark at some time. And it fell to the floor, and I looked down, here's a screenshot, and I see that it's a family history name card that I had printed a couple years ago and forgot all about it. And it still had some ordinances that needed to be done. And I had scheduled an appointment the next week to do endowments with my husband. And here was this name of an ancestor who fell out of a book who needed her endowment done. And so right away I thought, okay, maybe I'm supposed to do her endowment. So I looked it up and I saw that even though she was no longer reserved in my tree, her endowment still hadn't been done. So I reserved her again and planned to take her name to the temple that week. Well, that weekend, my older sister had sent me a text. She sent me a screenshot, here it is right here, of a name card, which she never does. And she said, look at this temple name that just randomly printed out of our tree when I went to print a name to take to the temple. And it happened to be the sister of the name that fell out of my book.
So I wrote her back and I said, it's a sign. I was straightening my room and this fell out of something. Think I'm supposed to keep working on the Barnes tree today. This was us who did Jenny Barnes on March 10th. So the last ordinances done on those cards were our family. We did it in the Ogden Temple. So that was really neat to see.
I don't believe in coincidences. This family was trying to get our attention. This is a family I often talk about in my videos. I've had some incredible family history experiences always through this line on the side of the tree. So we went and did her name, and then shortly later, my sister texted me again and said, I went to print another name and I got another Barnes from the same family. So clearly this family is ready to have their work done. They're ready to move forward, and they're really trying to let us know. And right around this time, I remembered a dream I had had probably 10 years ago about a name. It was a name I had never heard of before in my family tree, but she had the last name Barnes. And I saw her name on a computer screen in the dream. I was being shown in the dream to look her up and find her records. So the next day I woke up and I tried to find her. I couldn't find anything. And every now and then throughout the years, I would remember her name and I would go try to find her. And I couldn't find anyone in my tree with that name. Well, this time that name came to mind again because it's in the same family. So I decided to try a different approach. And I just decided to search for that name, whether or not it was in my tree or a direct link. So I type in her name and right away a record pops up. I go into family tree and I find this person and I see that all of her work's been done. So I'm confused and I'm thinking, okay, her work's been done. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do from here. Well, then I had the feeling to look at her family tree. So I opened it up wider and right away I started to see gaps. And I thought, okay, maybe it's not so much that I need to do her work, it's that I need to find her name and do the work for her family. So I opened up her tree and right away I started to fill in all the gaps. And as I'm finding these names and these records, I devoted 2 days straight to just this family tree. I set aside all my appointments. I set aside my to-do list and I dedicated 2 days straight to just working on this family tree and filling in all of these gaps. Still not even being sure if I could directly tie anyone in this tree into my own family tree in any way. It just felt like a priority. It felt like I needed to do this, and so I did it. And I remember at the end of the 2 days, I was exhausted and I thought to myself, was that a waste of time? Should I have spent so much time on this person that I'm not even sure if I'm related to and spent all that time building her tree? Was that a mistake? Should I have worked on lines in my tree that I know I'm directly related to, or should I have cleaned my house and spent more time on my callings and all these other things? And so I started to have doubts and sort of second guessed myself for spending all of that time because it felt like life sort of got out of balance during those 2 days. Well, the next day, as I was kind of having those doubts in my mind and kind of feeling a little bit bad, all of a sudden, all of the blessings came. It was like the windows of heaven opened up and the rains came down in a good way. And it was unbelievable. At first, it was just a little tender mercy here, a little tender mercy there, and then it got bigger and bigger and bigger.
In fact, here was one of those random little tender mercies. I got this surprise package in the mail from my mom, who just lives 45 minutes away. It was a handwritten note with a pair of socks. Pretty random, but it totally put a smile on my face, and I felt loved. And I put those socks on. I wore them the rest of the day. Every time I looked down and felt those warm, fluffy socks, I smiled and felt that love. In fact, while I was just sitting here right now editing this video, I had a craving for chocolate, and I started to feel guilty that this video was taking so long to edit. It's really consumed my whole day today. All of a sudden, I get a knock at the door. I go answer it, and this is laying on my porch. It was for me, you guys. It was a message from the Relief Society saying, remember, you are never alone. Never forget that you are loved. Never doubt that someone surely cares for you. And there was my favorite chocolate of all, Dove chocolate with hearts. You guys, I always see hearts. Right now, I really feel that the Lord is aware of me. He was aware of my craving for chocolate. He was aware of my guilt for spending so much time on this video today, and he used the ministering love and kindness of the Relief Society to help me feel his love right now.
And suddenly by the end of the day, I received a knock on the door and I got this unexpected card. I've got it right up here on the screen, and it had a balloon attached to it, and I was really confused. And I read the card and realized someone from my PTA had nominated me for some award that I had never even heard of before, and I had won that award. I was so confused. And so I texted the PTA president and asked her about it, and she said, yep, I nominated you for all the hard work you put in this year, especially with Battle of the Bands, and so I felt like you deserved this award, and I wrote something up, and you ended up winning for our entire region. So then a regional lady reached out to me and was really excited to share the news with me. And apparently this week there's a big breakfast where they're giving out these awards. And so my husband and I are invited to go to this breakfast and receive this award. And apparently these awards move on to a state level. So out of all the regions, they pick a winner at the state level. So anyways, I didn't know anything about this. It was so funny because not only had I been having doubts and second guesses about all the time I had invested into this family history, I was also feeling a little bit bad about all the time I put into the PTA and into the community, and just feeling like maybe I shouldn't give so much of my time, and, you know, sort of just having these doubts and second guesses and all of that. And then here was this unexpected surprise at my doorstep, letting me know that all of those efforts had been recognized and appreciated. So that was a huge tender mercy, and I just felt it from head to toe in that moment that the Lord is aware of me. He's aware of my struggles. He's aware of what I go through. He's aware of days when I feel exhausted and like I've worn myself too thin, and days when I feel like I'm not doing enough. He's aware of all of that. And this was his way of letting me know, I've got your back. When you put the things of my kingdom first and you make those things a priority, everything else in your life falls into place. I've got your back. I'll make sure it's all taken care of. And it was awesome. It was just such an amazing day and an amazing week. And it just felt like it kind of snowballed or dominoed from there. Every day just got better and better. And I just felt so happy and so blessed, and was experiencing a lot of peace in my family amidst all the storms. So even when we had days where we had parenting challenges in our home or unexpected things pop up, a bump in the road, I still was able to feel peace because I could feel the Lord in my life. I could feel that He was aware of me, that He was with me, helping me through all of this. I didn't have to do it alone. His yoke really is easy and His burden really is light, and I could feel that. That's how I was able to have peace during moments when I should have felt so much chaos. So anyways, I experienced my own testimony of the powerful blessings that happen in your life when you make an effort to do family history and to do that work in the temple. If things in your life feel like they're at a standstill, or you feel like you're stuck, you're not motivated, things never seem to be turning out, I would highly recommend stopping everything that you're doing in the moment and just setting aside some time to work on your family tree, even if it's just for 1 hour. Find a name. Just do whatever it is you can. And as you make an effort to do that each week, you will experience powerful blessings in your life. The Lord will have your back.
As I'm finishing editing this video, today was the day where I went to accept this award, and it was such a wonderful day, being around so many amazing people, watching so many other people get awards as well, and listening to how inspiring their stories are, and it just filled me with such a sense of gratitude to be able to celebrate all of these amazing people. It's just been such a wonderful week.
Now, one last example I want to share with this that just happened over this last weekend. It's so awesome. So with the PTA, I've been over Battle of the Bands, and our school competition took place in January. So after that, I was supposed to be kind of done with all of that and ready to take a break, right? So my son's band had won our school competition, so they were moving on to the multi-regional level. And I was excited to just go and be a spectator, sitting in the audience watching, because when you're over Battle of the Bands, you don't get to do that. When I was emceeing it, I was all over the place and didn't really get to sit and enjoy the performances. Well, leading up to that, a PTA leader from the regional level contacted me and told me that the lady who is over the judging part of the multi-regional Battle of the Bands competition wasn't able to be there. And so she asked if I'd be willing to help out. And in that moment, I was thinking, darn it, I just wanted to sit and enjoy and not have to really do anything. I was kind of feeling a little burnt out, like I just needed a break. But because they really needed the help, and this was something I knew how to do because I had just put on a competition at our school, I knew it wouldn't be hard for me to help. I knew it would be a simple thing for me to do. The lady who was over the judging had already done all the work, and she had printed all the score sheets and created little gift bags for all of the judges. So she had done all the groundwork. She just needed someone to be there to oversee it. So that was something I could totally do. And because my son's band was going to be there, I was going to be there anyways, so I thought I may as well help if I'm already going to be there. So I agreed to do it. Long story short, my husband agreed to help me, and we sat at the judging tables. The way that this school is designed, there's no room for the judges to sit in the front. There's no room between the stage and that first row of seats where you can put tables. So they put the judging tables in the very back of the auditorium. So the judges were really far away from the performers. And I remember thinking, well, that's not in the best interest of the performers. But you can only do what you can only do. Anyways, as we got everything set up and we explained everything to the judges, and in between each performance, they would send all of the scoring sheets down to us, and we would total it up and just keep it going throughout the competition. Well, when it was time for my son's band to perform, they had scheduled his band to go very first, and usually the first acts of the show experience issues with the audio And usually by the third or fourth singer or band, those issues are all worked out. So anyways, you never know. Anything can happen at any time. There can be some kind of technical difficulty and you still just have to keep performing and push through it. In fact, there was a singer there that night competing. She was a soloist and there was something wrong with her microphone. The stand wasn't tightened and the microphone just kept slowly slipping down lower and lower and lower, and she was having to bend over and bend over and bend over. And finally she was completely hunched over to where she could barely sing because her lungs were being compressed. And someone on the front row hurried and ran up and fixed her microphone while she was performing. But it took a while for people to catch it up front, and the people sitting in the very back, we couldn't do anything about it because we were in the very back of the auditorium. So things like that can happen. You just never know. Well, anyways, my son's band, the guitar was turned up really loud, and that's just something you hope the sound people will notice and adjust. And as a band, you can't really say anything because you're in the middle of performing. So the guitar was turned up really loud, and one of the judges docked his band 10 points, which is a really big deal. And if it weren't for that 10-point dock over something they didn't have control over, they would have been in the top 3. And the top 3 are the ones who get to move on to the state competition. So because of that 10-point dock, it placed my son's band outside of the top 3. And that was tough because that's something they didn't have any control over. The judges at our school competition were really understanding about things like that, and it's something that we talk about. But this particular judge was pretty harsh on them for that. And that's how he scored a lot of the bands, is he would do it in 10-point increments, which can make or break your score, where other judges docked smaller amounts of points and were pretty consistent with that. But this one particular judge only judged with large numbers. So he would either give you a full 20 on each category or bring you down to 10. So it was crazy. Anyways, when it was all said and done, we were told at this competition that it's standard to take the judges out into the hallway before announcing the winners and have them sort of reconvene and review all the scores again and make sure they're happy with those scores. So the lady who was over the judging, when she came and brought all of the stuff to my home, that was the main thing she counseled me on. And she said, at our competition, we allow the judges to reconvene one time before the winners are announced. And she said, usually what happens is every year it consistently happens that the first 4 or 5 bands and singers are judged very harshly because they have no one to compare it to. So they're really hard on those first 4 or 5 performances. And then everyone who comes later, they start to ease up on the scoring and they give them the benefit of the doubt. And so usually the bands and singers towards the end of the competition score much higher than the singers and bands at the beginning of the competition. And so she said, that's why it's really important that the judges get together and recognize that and make any adjustments that they need to. So I did what I was told, and we went out into the hallway with the judges and we gave them all the score sheets and we said, here's all the score sheets. You can review all the scores. Here's who the top 3 are for singers and bands. The judges didn't know that we were the parents of one of the bands. So 2 of the judges kept talking about the certain band that they were really surprised didn't make it into the top 3 and that they really felt they should be in the top 3. And when they said the name of the band, it was our son's band. So we were like, oh my goodness. So they were really trying to convince the other 2 judges to adjust their scores and to not be so harsh on things they couldn't control, like the sound of the guitar, to bring that band into the top 3. And the other judges began to agree with them on some things and then said, you know, it's what's done is done. I just kind of want to go home now, so just let it be. I don't want to change anything. And the other 2 judges were just kind of in disbelief, like, oh, really? Like, oh, that's terrible. They were talking about how amazing the song was that my son's band had wrote and how it was such a great song, and they really deserved to be in the top 3. They were so fun to watch and just such a great band. And so the other 2 judges just didn't want to make any adjustments. They just kind of wanted to be done. So that was that. And we were a little brokenhearted, but knowing there was nothing we could do about it, I just kept telling myself, well, everything happens for a reason. And clearly they're not supposed to win tonight. They're not supposed to come in the top 3. So I just found my peace with it. and we gave the results to the MC, and they gathered everybody into the auditorium. And what was hard about this part was we already knew the results. Where the school competition that I was over, I didn't want the person over the judging to tell me the results. It was in an envelope so that I found out at the same time everyone in the audience found out, so it was still a surprise when we announced the winners. But now we knew, so we were not really looking forward to it, and we went in, and the MC didn't really make a big deal out of the winners. He didn't call them up on stage or do a drum roll or anticipate that moment. He just quickly read off the cards and tossed out the certificates into the audience for the contestants to catch. So we couldn't film it or get any pictures of it. And I remember just kind of feeling a little bit sad, like, oh, that didn't really turn out how I hoped it would. I felt like that was going to go a lot differently. And we were a little bit sad, but then they announced the audience favorite vote. And throughout the night, everyone who bought a ticket and came through the door, they gave them these little colored tickets. One was for your favorite soloist and one was for your favorite band. They had the names of all the bands lined up and the names of all the soloists. They all had their own box, and you would go put a ticket in the box. And at the end of the night, they opened up all the boxes and counted up all the tickets. And they had the results of that all counted up before we had counted up the scores for the winners. And so before they announced the winners, they announced the audience favorite vote. And so they said, okay, we're going to announce who the audience picked as their favorite band. And they announced my son's band. And we were all so surprised because there was a band there that was pretty incredible. And it was pretty obvious that they would win first place, which they did. They were incredible. So we were really surprised that they didn't win the audience favorite vote. This was at a location pretty far from where we live, so it's not like we had local neighbors there or people that knew the band or knew our family who were voting for him. And not everybody who came to the competition was there to support a band or a soloist. A lot of the judges brought their family, and some of the volunteers brought their families, and so there were a lot of people there who weren't there to support anyone. And I'm guessing those were the people who voted for my son's band. So he was really happy that they won the audience favorite vote. And so when they announced the top 3 winners and his band wasn't in the top 3, even though we felt so sad for them because we knew that they could have been and that they were talented enough and definitely deserving of that spot, we could see how happy my son was that they had won audience favorite. And that meant more to him than the opinion of a few judges. So he was really excited. So that helped ease the blow. So anyways, later as we were kind of going over the scores, the judges go out in the hall, and after it's over, the bands can go up to them and talk to them. So my son and his band went around and talked to some of the judges and got their feedback. And then we went home, and I remember just thinking, well, it wasn't meant to be. He wasn't supposed to be in the top 3 of this competition. It just wasn't supposed to happen, or it would have. So anyways, his other band members were a little bit sad about it, and their families were a little bit sad about it, but we all just kind of moved on over time. And there were a few nights when I would lay in bed and think about it. You know, if only that one judge wouldn't have docked them 10 points on something they had no control over, they would have been in the top 3. And I remember kind of beating myself up and thinking, oh, I should have said something. I was over the judges. But then I would say, no, I did the right thing by not trying to influence it because my son's in the competition. You know, I made sure it was all on them and I had no influence over that. That was the right thing to do. So I would kind of go back and forth in my mind, and I would think things like, oh, I put so much time and effort into getting involved in Battle of the Bands because I have a high school student who loves music and who's in a band. And I felt like this was a great way for me to connect with him and help create opportunities for him and his friends. And so that was my whole motivation for getting involved 2 years ago and keeping it going and doing it again next year. And I just remember thinking, after all of that hard work and all of the hours and hours and hours that went into all of this, it just doesn't seem fair. And so I would kind of go back and forth in my mind until I finally completely moved on. And that's when a little miracle happened. Last Thursday night, I got a phone call late at night, and it was the regional leader of Battle of the Bands. And she texted me and said, hey, I have some great news for you. It's not too late to call me if you want to. So So I called her and she didn't answer, and we kind of went back and forth. And finally, I called her after 11 and she said, okay, I've got great news. I can't wait to tell you. She said, we have this little clause in the competition that we do every year where we count up all the totals of PTA memberships at all the schools. And whichever school has the highest amount of PTA signups or memberships from that year, they get to automatically send any band from their school straight to the state competition. And she said this year we totaled up all the scores, and the school that came in first place didn't have a band to send. They hadn't participated in Battle of the Bands. They weren't doing it at their school, so they had no one to send. So she said the school that came in second place was your high school. And she said, so because you guys had the second most signups in the whole state, you get to send a band straight to the state competition. And she said, I think I know which band you're going to pick. And I was like, oh my goodness, I'm so excited. They're going to be so excited. I couldn't believe it. So I woke up my son and I said, you're not going to believe it, but your band is going to state. And he's like, what? How's that possible? So I told him and he was like, wow. So they're really excited because when you go to the state competition, it opens up all kinds of opportunities just from being there. Some of the winners get to perform at the Utah State Fair, and just lots of awesome opportunities come out of that. So he was really excited. And in that moment, I was reminded of how that week I had again focused on family history and put the things of the Lord's kingdom first. I continued serving my community, the schools, and my ward, and my stake. I had recently taken on a new assignment to help out with a committee of people in my stake and build a stake website and put lots of content on it. And they assigned me over the month of March. So this whole month I've been putting all the content on the website and designing it. And it's been a lot of work. So between that and the PTA and family history work and my church calling, it's felt like a lot. And so I remember there were days where I would kind of go back and forth in my mind. Should I take a break for a whole week? Should I step away from some of this and just kind of do nothing at all? Is this really making a difference? Are these things that I'm doing necessary? Are they important? Or should I step away from it? You know, I was kind of going back and forth in my mind, but then I continued forward with a positive attitude. Like, no, these are things that I can do and I'm good at them. And I'm still able to be there for my family and make dinner and go grocery shopping and do all these other things. I'm able to make it work. It's just a lot of volunteer time. It's not a job. I don't get paid. But as I put forth all of my time and energy and effort into all of these things that are service oriented, I put zero time and effort into my own personal things, like my skincare business and all these things that I do on the side, my hobbies and my music, lots of things that I've wanted to do more with, spend more time building up, right? I put all those things on hold for all of these months. And so because of that, all of my numbers have kind of done this. So as I step away from my YouTube channel, I don't put out as many videos. I don't spend time on my skincare line promoting it and all of that. By the world standards, those things suffer and the numbers kind of go like this. But as I make that shift from building my own kingdom, right? My own kingdom here on this earth to building the Lord's kingdom, I am blessed in so many other ways, and those numbers go up. So I was thinking about that, and I thought, you know, that was another little bump in the road at that multi-regional competition, and feeling like things weren't fair and things were out of our control, and that was really hard, right? But it was a speed bump in the road. We didn't let it become a giant monster of an issue, right? We just kind of went over it and continued moving forward, kept our peace, kept our happiness, and just continued to serve. And again, it was another witness that when you do that, the Lord takes care of you. The Lord says, I've got your back. He knew all along we were going to be the school that would get to push a band forward to the state competition because of our PTA signups. He already knew that. So in that moment when my husband and I were sad that our son's band didn't make it into the top 3, he knew we didn't need to be sad. He saw the bigger picture. He already knew the plan, but we didn't. With our limited understanding, we didn't. So naturally, the human part of us was sad and we felt bummed, right? Of course, if we would have known what lay ahead in the future, we wouldn't have been sad. So anyways, it was just another witness that the Lord has your back. When you put the things of His kingdom first, He blesses you. Never in the way that you would imagine and never on your own timeline. Always on His timeline. And the last little part of the story that just kind of brings it full circle. It's really funny because just a couple days before that phone call, I was at the high school PTA meeting and they were talking about getting rid of the sign-up program for the next year because it was so much work and they didn't even know if it was really effective. And basically what it is, it's called PTA Perks, and it's where us volunteers come into the school once a month and we set up a table and we reward all of the students and teachers who are already paid members of the PTA for that year. So if they went online and paid the fee, they get free pizza and cotton candy and donuts and gift cards. We give out stuff every month and reward all of the members. And so of course, when other students see this, they come over and want to know, how can I get in on this? And that's when we tell them, oh, go online and sign up. Here's how you do it. And so those efforts got us a lot of new memberships all throughout the year. And I would come to the cafeteria and help do that, even though I was doing so many other things with the junior high PTA and the Battle of the Bands at the high school PTA. I still wanted to help because your fellow volunteers become your friends and you feel like a family and you just want to help ease their burden. You just want to help. Plus, it's fun going into the school and seeing your kids, right? So it's a lot of fun. So I didn't mind doing it. But at that meeting, they were starting to doubt the program, saying, did it really make that much of a difference? Did we get a lot of signups this year? Should we scratch that program next year and not worry about it? Because it's hard to find people who want to be over that. It's a lot of work setting it up and finding all the free stuff. And I remember thinking, I feel like it's made a difference. I feel like it's created a big awareness for the PTA and what it is we do and the kind of programs we sponsor that create all of these amazing opportunities for the students. And the students didn't know that before. They didn't know what the PTA was or what it did, and now they do, because we would come once a month to the cafeteria and tell all the students. And so I felt like it made a big difference. Well, anyways, once I got this phone call, I was able to call the president and share the good news with her and say, you know what, this program did pay off. And all those hours we put into it, it came full circle. And not only did it come back to benefit our own school and send our winning band straight to the state competition, but it also benefited my family. It benefited me personally. Me putting in that time and that effort ended up coming full circle and not just benefiting my community and my school, but also my son. That was awesome. So to me, it just felt like a huge blessing, like a big, tender mercy that when you give of your time and your talents to help build up your community and to help build up God's kingdom on the earth, it eventually comes full circle, especially when you're not doing it for a reward. You're not getting paid to do it month after month. You're not getting recognized for doing it. Most parents in your neighborhood or at your school have no idea what you're doing to help their child, their student, their family. They have no idea, and you know that. But you continue to do it because you care and because the Lord will bless your efforts. Every time you try to make a positive difference in your family, in your ward, in your state, in your school, in your community, because you care, the Lord blesses your efforts. And I find it interesting that it's always in the moments when I'm starting to second guess, when I'm starting to doubt or second guess, spending time serving, whether it's family history work or church or community, those days when you just feel so tired and you think, should I have spent all of that time doing that, right? That always seems to be when the Lord lets me know that He's aware of me and that He's blessing my efforts. And it's awesome. So anyways, I just want to say that I have felt so happy. Every week it fills my cup to serve at church, to serve at the schools, to serve in the community, to serve my family. And as these little bumps pop up in the road and I choose to keep my peace and keep my focus on Christ, I quickly get over that speed bump and a giant blessing is waiting around the corner. That's been my experience, and it's been awesome. And so because of that, I have felt so happy lately. And again, my life is in no way perfect right now. We experience all kinds of ups and downs and hurdles and speed bumps every week in our family. But I'm able to still be happy and still feel that peace and be excited about life because I yoke myself to the Lord and I put the things of His kingdom first. I know that's one of the best ways to build your ark right now, is to put an emphasis on family history work. And I know that if you do that, you will feel peace, happiness, and blessings pouring down in your life. I know that's true, and I say it in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Thanks so much for joining me today, you guys. I hope you're having a wonderful day. I hope you have a wonderful week and a wonderful general conference, and I will see you next time.